Miyabi is no longer the strongest Anomaly DPS in Zenless Zone Zero.
Oh no!
Promeia has officially taken the crown, and I got the data to prove it. I put both of them to the test in every available in-game mode with the most common teams, the same bosses, and used a combination of average versus over-the-top builds. But what nobody's talking about is that Miyabi only needs 60 seconds to remind everyone why she was the strongest Anomaly DPS in history. Before we jump into the meat and potatoes of those results, it's only fair for me to explain why Miyabi is and has been revered in such a high regard for years being like 2. Because if you weren't playing Zenless Zone Zero during her patch, you genuinely cannot understand how OD this situation is. Miyabi wasn't just the best Anomaly DPS when she dropped, she was the best DPS in the game, period. This was so unanimous that anyone debating against it in the community was seen as foolish. Every tier list, every showcase, every who should I pull thread, Miyabi. The answer was always Miyabi. She redefined what Anomaly was even allowed to do. Before her, Anomaly was this cool playstyle that people slept on. In fact, most players didn't even invest into Anomaly until she got announced. After her, everybody wanted in. She basically became the measuring stick for the entire archetype. You want to know if a new Anomaly DPS is worth pulling? You compare them to Miyabi. That is the standard she set. And here's the thing, she's still being built right now. New players who came into the game towards the end of 2025 are properly learning her and finding out she's still a monster. She's not some relic of old age, and she's not power crept into the trash. She is genuinely, to this day, one of the most complete kits in the game. So when I say Promeia has something to prove in this video, I mean that. This isn't can the new unit beat the old unit. This is can you actually dethrone the Gojo of New Eridu. Historically, Miyabi has always been a character that easily clears whatever content is placed in front of her, but as of late, that's only gotten harder and harder for all types of players. On top of the insane increase in enemies' HP and constant anti-anomaly mechanics, the devs have actively made decisions to stop Miyabi's ability to continue dominating in the game. With that out of the way, let's break down how I went about testing things. First, I wanted to start with a comparison between the same teams representing Yuzu Ice against Dead End Butcher. For comparison's sake, Miyabi's Yuzu Ice team was able to kill Dead End Butcher in almost every single deadly assault prior to about a patch or so ago, all at M0. At this current moment in time, I'm not personally spending days looking for the perfect, most optimal clear, since the average won't even think twice about achieving that. Based off Pridewind's data currently, the average score sits somewhere between 25 to 30k. For a team that requires more mechanical work than the others, is at a lower cost, and isn't fully optimized, I'll take that. What makes Yuzu Ice so strong for Miyabi is the combination of attack, anomaly, and crit buffs the entire team provides to her. Along with the most important factor is her ability to freeze through her own special frost attribute. It holds all the same properties of ice, but doesn't count as ice. Because of that, it means we can double down with Sokaku and get back-to-back freezes. So not only are we able to completely freeze the boss in any position, but we're also able to freeze the timer for insanely high damaging ultimate attacks. On top of all of that, ice can disorder off of frost, and vice versa, adding another layer of extra damage on top of what we're doing. Everything about this team is right up the alley of what Miyabi wants from her partners. Contrary to that, we have Promeia's rendition of Yuzu Ice, which unfortunately is nowhere near the same power level. My highest record was 18k, and without disorders happening, I barely got any performance points, or chilling meter for that matter. On paper, the idea was cool, but Promeia doesn't need Sokaku at all. If you're looking for an attack buff, then sure, I guess, but even Lucy would benefit Promeia more in any given team. Ice cannot disorder off of ice, which removes that extra bit of damage from the team unless you're banking on Yuzuha's random assaults. And so I guess you can make up for the fact that you get multiple freezes to give you extra meter, but Sokaku is so pointless here that all of this damage is basically just Promeia. Ultimately, Miyabi still takes the cake for any player who's a fan of Yuzu and Mono Ice. It's especially beneficial for players that vertically invested into Miyabi too, because now that score creeps up even closer to kill territory. After that, I took some time breaking down how each agent's respective free-to-play team would work. Originally, I used Lycon plus Nicole for both of them, but eventually realized that there was more than Nicole who counted as free-to-play, and to be honest, Nicole is just not Miyabi's best free-to-play support, at least not in this fight. So the results were kind of similar to the Yuzu Ice test. Given the fact that Yuzu Ice is just a hyper-carry mono ice, that makes sense. Where Promeia gained no real benefit from Sokaku, I replaced her with Nicole and Lucy, but the results were pretty much the same. Lucy performed worse, but still, neither team comfortably cracked 20k. Now this could be for a number of reasons, but I'm not spending 30 hours looking for the perfect route that gives me 100% Nicole uptime versus 80%. Maybe there's a different build Lycon needs here, like 4-piece Astral to help jump the score of 17k up to 20k. There might even be some drawbacks to netting too many freezes mid-stun. Regardless of what I could have done, Promeia's absolute free-to-play team would fail in my eyes. It needs more power or too technical of skill for the average player jumping into the game just for her. And because I know someone's gonna mention it, I would have included Zhao, but I really couldn't figure out how to make it free to play with Zhao and a free to play stunner that was gonna help her achieve the same thing. Triple ice just does not work. On the flip side, Miyabi performed worse when I tried the same team comp, but that's when my buddy Mo reminded me that Sokaku still fits those free-to-play requirements, and Mono Ice is still a contender for one of the strongest free-to-play teams in the game. Once we did that, clearing 20k was relatively simple so long as you understand how to play Mono Ice, or at the bare minimum, how anomalies actually work. So once again, Miyabi takes the cake in a more specialized team, and with vertical investment, that gap only gets bigger. At this point, I'd stopped restricting myself to low limit tests and started playing more standard setups. I replaced Lycon with characters like Nangong Yu, Yuzuha, Vivian, or even Yanagi. This is where that gap between the two Anomaly DPS really started to close in, and I started to understand why. For the remainder of this section in the video, I'm gonna speak on a per character basis in order to not drag this out into an entire hour-long vid. So when I speak about Vivian as a partner, I'll be speaking about how she performs compared to Miyabi and Promeia. Then I'm gonna move on, but I'll save their best in slot segment for last. Starting first, we have Nangong Yu. By replacing Lycon on the team, both Miyabi and Promeia's performance increased over 10k points depending on the team. For Promeia, it's clear Nangong Yu was designed with her in mind. She doesn't care about anomalies the same way the other agents do, and only really cares about using any anomalies to refill her own resources. Since Nangong Yu builds ether fast, it means you can time your disorders for extra chill points, and with the free of blooms she makes, that also gives Promeia more resources to use. Top that off with her ability to stun relatively fast, and you've got what just might be Promeia's best partner on the market, and I'm stressing the word might be. For Miyabi, most of the same is true, except here's where the major difference lies. Where Promeia only cares about a blooms and disorders to refill her points, Miyabi cares about when her teammates trigger disorder. Because whenever that happens, she gains 2 stacks of Shimotsuki, and maxing that out to 6 is how you get her strongest EBAs. Nangong Yu helps her do this by essentially forcing a disorder double down. Similarly to what happens when using Yanagi, Nangong has the ability to force polarity disorders against enemies under the right conditions. Now she gains 4 stacks at once instead of 2, effectively giving Miyabi access to well over 4 to 5 EBAs per stone rotation, and she actually cares about freezing the enemy since it allows her EBAs and ultimates to all fit within the same stun window. Since this doesn't require a meter to fill up but instead just an action, this makes Nangong Yu a much stronger partner for Miyabi over Promeia, at least in practicality. Next, we can talk about Vivian. I believe at this point is where Promeia really starts to outshine Miyabi. From my own testing, as well as reviewing other players' tapes, a well-played Miyabi takes Promeia just under kill territory with a full M0 team. I've seen scores as high as 55k so far, which puts her on par with some of the most recent discoveries I've shared with you all about M0 Sissia being a monster in disguise. For Promeia, Vivian is an amazing sub DPS thanks to her natural ability to use a blooms off field. At first, the two felt wonky to play together due to how quickly Promeia sucked up Vivian's feather blooms, but after getting the hang of it, everything flows like butter. Not only does Vivian refund a substantial amount of chill points every time she procs in a bloom, but because she can trigger corruption off field, this helps you set up combos that give you 3 to 4 blooms, corruption, freeze, and disorder all at once. This is how you'll get those points mid-combo to keep spamming EBAs from Promeia. And thankfully, Vivian can be played exceptionally well within a free-to-play team using Zhao or a premium team using Yuzuha. Together, their insane amount of burst damage happening constantly throughout the fight truly does bring them into a top 3 team's territory. Now in Miyabi's case, it's not like Vivian isn't one of her best partners either. It definitely works, but there's a noticeable jump in both performance and damage output compared to Promeia. However, I don't think the jump is so noticeable that a previous Miyabi owner would suddenly be worried about not comfortably clearing a fight against Butcher. I will say though, playing Promeia's version of the team is significantly easier than Miyabi's, and with the future wind stuff coming up, such as Windswept Vortex, this could create a bigger problem for Miyabi. We'll talk about that more once we get there. And finally, we can look at each of their best in slot teams, or at least what the community has perceived as their best in slot. This is going to be a core consisting of Nangong and Yuzuha, which seems to be the go-to for everyone, I guess. Now, personally, I believe matchups play a big factor in most fights, but in Promeia's case, I'm convinced that Yuzu Vivian is her best in slot. Once you actually learn the team, everything about it just flows smoothly, and it's got plenty of wiggle room on how you want to approach any fight. Nangong is amazing, and honestly, it could be favored in either direction. The agent I really wanted to talk about here was Yuzuha though. From all of my testing, I'd say she's the most impactful teammate to Promeia right now. The argument could be made for Miyabi as well, but it feels like Nangong gave her such a boost in overall account performance that I'd argue she's more important for Miyabi. In Yuzuha's case, providing either agent on the team a means of building their respective anomaly pretty fast, this leads to a healthy amount of disorders at a consistent rate, which both Ice DPS appreciate a tremendous amount. There are some teams where you can get away without a Nangong, but it feels like the more you play her, the more you recognize how beneficial Yuzuha is to have on the team. This is especially true once you move away from fights like Butcher that are more favorable for Ice DPS. But here's the final thing I want to talk about regarding Miyabi versus Promeia. Okay, so naturally, anyone hearing all of this would assume that Promeia is the clear-cut winner, right? I mean, who cares about Mono Ice when Nangong is in the game? Obviously, that was a joke. I know everyone does not own every character, so yo, please take a chill pill. However, before I just hand Promeia the trophy and call it a day, we need to talk about Shiyu defense, because this is where I have to give credit to my ever-growing theory that certain characters and teams excel in different in-game modes and should be valued as such. Miyabi still decimates Shiyu defense. I mean, it's close, but Miyabi's innate ability to group and shred through anything in front of her really does help shave off time in these fights, which goes into what I told you guys plenty of times before. Most of Shiyu defense clears fail or succeed depending on how good you are at mob clearing. And honestly, it makes complete sense once you understand why. Shiyu defense is not just a single target boss fight. It's closer to a traditional raid dungeon raid, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. The thing from MMOs. You are clearing waves, you're managing proper positioning, you're trying to hit multiple enemies at once, and that is exactly where Miyabi's kit shines. Her gigantic freeze radius, her AoE application, the way her anomaly spreads across the entire field, she was literally built for this game mode. She's not only for Deadly Assault. If you route her fights properly, she easily gives players an S rank, and with higher level play, that S+ rank is coming home. If we put Promeia in that same scenario, she's still doing damage, an absurd amount. So don't think that I'm saying she's bad, but she is more like a precision-based DPS being asked to do a bunch of crowd control. That's not really what she was designed for, and the numbers showed that every single time I tested it. Similar to other Shiyu clears, if I made even a single mistake by not lining up the mobs together so she could delete them with her blooms, then I'd be forced to sit there for another 20 to 30 seconds trying to stun the other guy, or I would just restart. So if Shiyu defense is your main focus, if that's the content you're grinding every reset, then Miyabi still might be the right call for your account. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you to bench her just because a new unit dropped. That's not how this works. But here's the part where it gets a little more interesting. The second we leave the mob phase and we walk into a single target boss situation, the whole conversation changes, because Miyabi now has a timer. This is where I started to see something in the data that I honestly didn't expect when I first set up the test. In the early seconds of the fight, Miyabi is clearly ahead, like really ahead. Her burst window hits fast, her damage front loads, and if you're running an optimized team that takes advantage of her freezes, then she's just netting free damage. But then the fight keeps going, and Promeia quickly starts to catch up. Every second that passes, her bloom stacks are building, her rotations are tightening, and she starts chipping away little by little at the boss's HP in such a way that genuinely caught me off guard the first time I learned how to do it. For the first couple of days, I was playing this character completely wrong. Her goal isn't to win early on. She's trying to burst down the boss in a single stun as much as possible. If your Miyabi has not closed the fight by the 60-second mark in Shiyu defense, Promeia doesn't just catch up in performance. She completely takes the lead. The DPS gap becomes too noticeable, and the longer the fight goes after that point, the worse it gets for Miyabi. Technically. Basically, think of Miyabi as a closer. She needs to end the fight fast, or the Hoyo ninjas start to remind her that she's not supposed to be relevant to the meta anymore. Then Promeia is like a literal ninja or assassin, and I mean that figuratively. She doesn't need to win with the opener, she just needs the fight to last long enough to build her resources for trial by cold, and then delete the boss in a disgusting burst combo. And in most high difficulty single target content, you don't always get to decide how long the fight's gonna last. Some things are calculated and other things are complete RNG. Defiler. So what we're actually looking at isn't who does more damage, it's how long is this matchup going to last? And then that question, along with a few others about the characters you own on your account, is what separates these two completely. What's that famous quote Wesker says? 7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare with you. So where does that leave us players who invested into Miyabi? Promeia is the strongest Anomaly DPS in Zenless Zone Zero right now. We could make an argument that Arya is right next to her since they are almost one and the same, but that's a whole different video for a whole different day. I tested it, I checked the tapes, the data shows it, and I'm not gonna beat around the bush. This is the new future for Anomaly DPS. If you are starting fresh and you want the best Anomaly carry for your account going forward, that is your answer. But, and this is the part I need you to actually hear, Miyabi is not cooked, at least not yet. Pulling for her was not a mistake. She is not some cautionary tale about pulling early and power creep, blah, 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 blah. She is still one of the most complete kits in the game, and in the right content, specifically Shiyu defense, or maybe the new in-game mode we're getting later on, she is still the best option on your account by a long shot. If you built her, you did not waste your resources. You built an extremely volatile weapon. That weapon just has a very specific job now, and unfortunately, it's gotten to a point where it is completely at the dev's discretion for which bosses enter the in-game or not. So here's how I'd actually think about everything practically. If your main focus is Shiyu defense, run Miyabi. She was built for it and the numbers proved it. Unless you don't have Miyabi, then pull Promeia, which I feel is kind of obvious. If you're pushing single target in-game content, you want a much easier Anomaly agent to play, and your fights are consistently running past 60 seconds, Promeia just might be the unit for you. And if I was giving advice, it's really not a debate. But what if you have both? You are literally just eating at I was really gonna say a $5 buffet, bro. That'd be a crazy steal, I'm not gonna lie to you. You're eating at a buffet. Run Miyabi in the mob clearing floors and slot Promeia into the boss fights. That is not a compromise, that is just good account building. The meta didn't kill Miyabi. It forced her into a specific role now, and Promeia just seems to be what Hoyoverse wants to represent the future of Anomaly teams. Well, her and Arya. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me. If you have more questions, just drop a comment down below. Good luck on your Promeia pulls, and let me know which one of these characters you're trying to push for content. I might stream tomorrow, but don't quote me on that. Now subscribe, or YouTube will literally never tell you that I uploaded. Smell you later.